Hello neurohackers, I'm going to cover some debugging again with VS Code since we can never get enough practice with that. And I will be walking through some of the steps to clone a repository from GitHub and just getting your work started. So the first step that we'll do is move over on our browser, go to GitHub to find the repository that we want to use. So for me, it'll be relatively easy since I'm a part of this group, this Mentee assignments. And it's the one that I've updated most recently. So it's the PITCHBehData. We'll click on the cloner download here, copy it to our clipboard, then we'll switch over to the terminal and we'll cd into documents, devel, and we'll type git clone that URL with Control-Shift-V. Now cd into the repository that we just made, cd into bids code, and I will put in my plug for VS Code again. So VS Code, please download it. If you're on Linux, well, it'll automatically pull you to the install page, which is relevant for your operating system. So for me, that would be a .deb file. But I believe it can also be added via a PPA. A snap. So snaps are kind of like containers. If you want to install it like that, I just have the actual deb file that I installed, which works fine for me. And then, yeah, I probably ran all this code to actually get it installed. Oh, actually no, I just ran, sudo apt install. Then it added, oh, interesting. So then it added everything for me. Okay. So that's all I did there to install VS Code, is just install the .deb, and then it was under updates already. Okay. Also cover how to debug with the Python Debugger tool that's outside of VS Code, but first we'll cover the one that's inside VS Code. All right, now to open VS Code, so clear, we'll just type code, period. Open the file that we want to open. And you do need some Python extensions. So we'll see what extensions that I have installed here. The one that you're going to want is the Python extension. So you can search it in this box for Python right there. Right. And now we're going to get started with debugging with VS Code. So the first step is to understand where do I go to even look at the debugger. Well, if you installed the Python extension, you should have this panel right here that says debug. And you can click on that, And this says in this gearbox, it takes you to the configuration of the Python debugger tool. So we'll have some basic options here, such as just running the current file, which is the selection that we will choose today. So one last thing before we actually get started with debugging is that we need to select Breakpoint. So if we want to use this to learn, we would probably want to select the breakpoint near the beginning. So you can do that by holding down the function key with the, so select the line that you want to be on, hold down the function key and hit F9. And that will set a breakpoint. And you can tell that the breakpoint is set with this red little dot right here. And I believe, yeah, you can create other breakpoints just by clicking on the same little area over here by the other red dot. And I wonder if you can do that. And you can do that no matter what tab you're in. So in case you don't want to do the function F9, you can just hit the click in this area, and that'll set a breakpoint. So the breakpoint will be the point in which the code actually stops and hands you back control. So you can step to the next line or do other operations to investigate what's going on with the code. Okay, so we'll see what's selected here, the current file. So that is that's the type of debugging strategy that we want to do. We want to run the current file, and we just want to have it run. All right. So click on the little green arrow here, and it handed back control to us. We can see the local variables are defined, and we have this little control bar here, which we can select continue, which will just run through all the code until we hit another breakpoint. Since no other breakpoint is defined, it will just run through the entire, through the rest of the code. We can step over, which will mean it'll move over to the next line. We can step into, which means it will step into the function that we called. So it'll step into the changedir function. And step out, the opposite of step in. So if we stepped into a function and we're walking through very low level details and we want to get a better context of what we're doing, then we can step back out. So not that we would ever really do this, but let's see what stepping into. Oh, I guess there was nothing to step into. Okay. So if I step into this, what does that do? Okay. So let's see where we are. So maybe I shouldn't step into something if I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll just step over. I guess going beyond your current code environment, maybe you can step into functions that you've defined for this file, but it won't really step in or do much for when you're trying to step into functions that are defined elsewhere. But I'm not sure, so don't take my word on that. Okay, so now back to a basic level. We can see that on this Debug Console tab, we can type in path, and we'll get a string. We can type in outer, we'll get another string, and we can type in behave, which should be a list. Oh, actually we didn't run it yet, so step over. Now it's ran. Now it should be a list, and we can see what's at the first what's at the first element of this list. Looks like it's a string. Now we can step over, and now we get into a for loop. And here we have a pattern that we're trying to match. We can type in the pattern. Okay, so that's the pattern that we're trying to match. And we can see if something that we type in could match that pattern if we don't quite understand that pattern. So we could type in something like my test string, and we could make it equal to pre-proc data, and it's asking for two numbers, so I'll say 99. Then it's asking for either a C or an E, A through Z. I mean, what it's asking for is whether it's control or experimental. And then pre-post, let's just say pre. Then we'll say flanker, run 1, behave. And then we want, what do we want? And we're optionally collecting all. And let's just say this. Oh, text. Then I'll type in my res equals re dot search. That will be pattern. And what did I just call mine? My test string. I can see my res dot groups. Oh, that's a function, so. Okay, so that returns a tuple that has the elements 99, controller, pre, 1, and all. Which makes sense since the parentheses are capturing those groups. So then if all is not in, then we want res.groups. Then I make a specific key that joins all the elements within groups except for, is that the last one? I think. Let's see what it does. So this is the great thing about interactive debugging, because we can look at everything. Okay. And then if I didn't do that, what would I get out? All. So what would it be if I didn't have all? So then it would just be 99 controller pre. It didn't have all. But I guess we can see because we actually have actual factual file names. Okay, so that's this current file name. We'll step over, see what the dict key is. So let's see what this dict key is now. 01 control post 1. Okay. Let's see. Res.groups. So all is still part of the groups. It's just okay, that makes sense. I see. So all, or at least this capture group, is still used. It's just if it's not actually there, it's just given a none instead of a string. Okay. Well, I think this is pretty much what I wanted to show for stepping through this code. We can step through the rest just by hitting step over. I guess there is one more thing that I'd like to show, and that is we don't want to step through every iteration of this for loop. So we can add in another break there and just say continue. And I'll run through the entire for loop until we get to here. And then we can continue on. Okay. So now there's something similar that we can do without VS Code, in case you love the terminal and you don't want to use VS Code. And we can do that with Python Debugger. So with that, we'll exit out of our debugging session here. And we'll type import Python Debugger, and we'll do Python Debugger set trace. So this package is PBD, the Python Debugger, appropriately. And if we want to step into the code, we have to use pbd.setTrace. So now, with this, we need to be a little bit more cognizant of where we want to place the set traces, since we would want to think ahead and say, well, I can't just hit continue and move on to the next trace unless if I, or move on to the next breakpoint unless if I have a breakpoint that's already set. So for here, I'd want to go after every for loop and make sure that I have a set trace after every for loop. So then I have the option of skipping the for loop but not exiting all the code with the continue statement. And look at all these for loops. Okay, I'm not going to add it everywhere, but I think these are enough just to get the idea. Now we'll head back over to the command line. And now instead of running it in VS Code, we'll literally just call the script here. It doesn't take any arguments or anything. And now we're given the Python Debugger interface. Now we can hit next to move down the line. We can see that's path, outer, behave. So we can see behave is a big long list. You can see path as a string. You can see outer is that. Actually, that made me realize something. Untitled. Untitled. Okay, so there's not conflicts in the names. Now I can hit continue, C for continue. And now I can see what's defined with the dir command. So sometimes there's not useful information that's popped out, so this is what makes the Python debugger a little bit harder to work with. We get the number of the line that we are in the module, so it often behooves you to come back here to check where exactly we are in the code. But it is useful in case you don't have access to text editor or you need to do some changes, quick debugging. But I guess for really interactive learning, I would strongly encourage using vscode. And then when you're done with all of your traces, you need to remember to delete all those entries, because you don't want debugging statements. Missed one. You don't want all those debugs in the code when you actually try to run it, because otherwise people will get annoyed. Okay, so if one was to try to understand this code and then modify it, just stepping through it line by line and playing around with the variables and what they do and what you can do with them is definitely going to put you in a really good place to actually modify and make the code do what we want, since the ultimate goal for this is to change it and make it read from another directory and just do the processing in a little bit different way. So being able to step through it and understand it line by line is definitely going to be a helpful and almost essential step to being able to modify it. Okay. That's everything. Hopefully you got at least a little bit of useful information out of this. Again, install VS Code, install the Python extension for VS Code, and you will see yourself making lots of changes a lot more productively. Okay. And with that, I'll say thanks for listening.